Right, my beloved Madridistas, welcome back to Madrid. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, let's put a little bit of meat on the bone with regards to the whole Xabi situation. Look, when this news broke yesterday, I put out a short, sort of 3 minutes long, giving you guys sort of my first impression. I know a lot of people were sort of surprised by this. I got to be honest with you, and those of you that have been following my channel, I was not surprised. I was not surprised at all. I could see this coming a million miles away. I want to talk to you guys about sort of the kind of main storyline that's going around in terms of how this happened. And I'm going to tell you why I don't believe it. I don't believe it in its sort of more rudimentary form. I want to give you my thoughts on sort of how this happened, who is at fault, and kind of where we go from here. So, okay, let me give you guys my thoughts on this kind of, major event at Real Madrid. Thanks for joining me. Let's get started. Madridistas, welcome back. Okay, let's talk about the Xabi situation, and I'll tell you the sort of story that's kind of going around here, and kind of why I think it's a sort of very convenient oversimplification. Look, the story that kind of is going around is that sort of after the Supercut, there was a meeting between José Ángel Sánchez, Florentino Pérez, and Xabi, and that at that point in that meeting, José Ángel and Florentino said that they're very worried and uncomfortable with the physical preparation of the team, and that they want Pintus to take over that side again. And that created a problem. Xabi Alonso said, no, I have a commitment to my team, the team that I brought with me, and I'm not willing to back down on this. And if I'm not able to keep my staff and the people that I brought in their current functions, I will resign. So the official story is that Xabi resigned because he was being muscled into putting Pintus back in charge of the physical preparation team. He wouldn't accept it, being loyal to his team, and therefore resigned. Now, this is a convenient story in the sense that it gives Xabi an out, okay? It gives Xabi an out in the sense that he's the one that resigned. He's the one that was sticking up for his people. So it kind of covers him in a way, but it also covers the club, because the club can say, well, it was his decision. He decided to leave. He left on his own accord, sort of thing. So I think this is a sort of very convenient story, and it's sort of the story that everyone is running with here. But look, the physical preparation issue, and those that that have followed me, I've mentioned this more than once. I never necessarily understood why they pushed Pintus aside, because it's true that Pintus, we had injury problems during the Pintus era, especially towards the end. Pintus is a highly experimental, he is very experimental. A lot of people have sort of been critical of his methods. He uses a lot of technology, a lot of sort of modern kind of new ideas. So he is very unconventional in his approach. And some people had criticized him in the past for that. We did have a string of injuries, admittedly. Now, not enough of those injuries were muscular, in my view, to really blame Pintus, because if a player sprains his ankle or, hurts himself clashing with another player, this has nothing to do with physical preparation. These things happen in football. But when you do start to get a lot of muscular injuries, that does have to do with either the player being underprepared or overplayed. Okay, so that is going to be the fault of either the physical preparation team or the manager who's allocating too many minutes to the player. So there is that. I was always a little bit surprised, because my view was always that in general, I thought Pintus over the years overall had done a good job with the squad. And I say this, primarily because in the last few years, we would get to the end of the season, and if you watched sort of a quarterfinal or semifinal of the Champions League, that players looked fresh and they could play really tough matches, even go into overtime, and they looked okay. So I never really had a big issue with Pintus, and I kind of, Xabi obviously wanted to bring his own people, and that's understandable. Most managers do that. But I was always a little bit apprehensive about why Pintus was pushed aside. But that is the sort of narrative going around, that this was the critical issue that sort of did it. That I don't believe this at all. I think that this was probably maybe the last straw, but certainly had nothing to do with the totality of the situation. And I think that this conversation happened before the Super Cup. I have a feeling that this conversation about the Pintus thing happened before the Super Cup. It didn't happen as recently as they're kind of claiming. Look, all of this, this is a kind of multi-layered problematic, and it started. I would say that it started with that Vini, that one match where, Vini sort of threw up his arms when he was substituted. And that was the first time that we saw any evidence of tensions in the squad. And of course, the media here jumped on it. And then you started to get rumors of the players being unhappy, and does Xabi control the dressing room and all this kind of stuff. And that is where the rumors began about Xabi maybe not having control of the dressing room. Now, that is something that the club, generally speaking, can tolerate little rumors and tiny little frictions. That's not a big deal if you're winning. Okay, this is the main recurring theme that you guys need to remember about all of this. We weren't winning, okay? So look, little problems and differences of opinion are swept under the rug and they wash away as long as you're winning. If you're not winning, everything becomes a problem and everything becomes magnified. So the issue was, yes, you did start to have some rumors about Xabi not controlling the dressing room, but that wasn't it. Well, the problem was that after the Valencia match, we started a string of absolutely awful performances that were completely unacceptable considering the squad, considering the investment that had been made in the squad. It was completely unsustainable. And every successive match increased the pressure, and it all culminated with the match against Celta. This was the absolute tipping point, and I am convinced, and I've mentioned this in my videos, that I think the decision was made after the Celta match that this was over. And that I think that they decided that at the next defeat, whenever it was sort of more practically convenient, because we were talking about the end of the calendar year, going into the new year, the holidays, they weren't going to do anything then, so they waited. So either you miraculously turn things around, or at the next defeat, you're out. And that is exactly what happened. And let me repeat this. What the problem is that you're not winning. And you have to understand a little bit how Real Madrid functions, internally, because Florentino's attitude is sort of, I will provide everything in the world in terms of technology and staff and everything, and we'll buy the best players in the world, but you have to win. You have to win. There is absolutely no excuse. And Real Madrid will simply not tolerate this kind of performance, match after match after match. Is something that other clubs might be able to handle if they believe that they're in a restructuring situation. Real Madrid is not like that at all. So the idea that this was exclusively about Pintus, no. This had to do with the ongoing poor performances culminating in the Celta match. I'm 100% convinced that this was decided after the Celta match, and from that point on, it was a matter of just waiting for exactly the right moment and for the next defeat. So either there was a miraculous turnaround or he was out in the next defeat. But it wasn't just a Pintus thing that bothered Xabi. No, this was the ongoing sensation that he didn't control the squad, because two, some of the players, kind of come across looking a little childish, and, is he indulging the childishness of some of these capricious players? All that kind of stuff was an undercurrent. And then you overlay it with terrible performances like the ones that we've been seeing the last few weeks. And that is the kiss of death, because the culture of the club does not tolerate this. This is not a place where you can spend 2 or 3 years trying a new project and, give them time to fix things. Real Madrid expects results immediately. And Florentino's attitude is, I will give this club everything in the world, but you have to win. You have to win. We don't give you the best of the best of the best for this. And so I knew that this was just a matter of time. Now, don't forget how Real Madrid works internally. Real Madrid is what I would describe as a collaborative dictatorship, okay? Florentino Perez absolutely monopolizes power in the organization. He's made absolutely sure of it. And the buck stops with him always, okay? So Florentino Perez will listen to the advice. He surrounds himself with very, very good people and will take their advice, and very often will take their advice over his own opinion. So it is collaborative and it is inclusive in terms of decision making, but there is no doubt that it is a dictatorship and he has the last word. So the theory is that, Xabi was always the idea of José Ángel Sánchez. Florentino wanted to get rid of him a lot earlier, and I had been hearing that for a while, and that the only reason he was still around, and I've mentioned this in videos, that the only reason he was still around is because José Ángel Sánchez was sort of telling him, just wait, give him a little bit more time. But Florentino Pérez does not tolerate it. Look, he understands the DNA of this club. He understands the history of this club. And I think he's a very good expression of the values of the club in many, many ways. But there is no way in hell Florentino was going to put up with what he was seeing. And you could smell this a mile away. Everything, little issues and little frictions can be glossed over and sugar-coated as long as you're winning, but you do not tolerate this kind of play and this level of mediocrity at Real Madrid. It just doesn't happen. Okay, who's at fault? Well, I think everyone. Okay, because let's start at the top. Again, we've covered this, but it is very important because this is really the I think, fundamental problem from the top down. At the top, you have Florentino Pérez, who's bringing players without thinking necessarily efficiently, tactically about what position needs to be strengthened with what kind of player. That was not the motivation behind all of the players that came. It was commercial. It was Kylian because he always wanted Kylian and he's the best and we must have him. And it's good for our brand, our image, our marketing, and financially, it made a lot of sense. Why do we bring all the kids? Arda Güler and Mastantuono and Enrique. Well, that is because we had a very good experience with Vini and Rodrigo. We paid up for them because they were very young, but boy, did it work out. And therefore, Florentino thought the only way to survive in modern football is to get the geniuses early and to bring them early. And that is what prompted it, a fear of missing out, to make sure that you don't see a Messi or a Lamine or someone else go somewhere else, to make sure that they come here. But those two motivations, determining what players you bring, are not really sensible from a sporting standpoint, because you end up having what we've discussed many times on this channel, overlap in key positions. Because in any position, there has to be a notional understanding of who is the first pick and who is the second pick. Who do you think is a better number 10, Arda or Jude? Who's better on the left, Kylian or Vini? These are questions that you should not have to be asking yourself, because these are players that all deserve to be starters, who all believe they should be starters, but they're overlapping in their position. And so you end up with a hodgepodge of players where the pieces don't fit. And I've said this a million times, but that is the fundamental problem. That is one of the pieces of the puzzle, okay? And we blame that upstairs at the office of Florentino Pérez, because you're bringing players and you're motivated by things that have to do with factors other than just tactics and football. So they're responsible in a way. Xabi is also responsible, because you cannot tell me that with the quality of players you have, I know we've had a lot of injuries and all that, but the football that he was showing us wasn't working. And it's either not working because your tactics are wrong, and we thought we knew what they were, but they fell apart. Either your tactics are wrong or you're not able to get the team to execute them. And whatever the case is, in either of those scenarios, it's your fault. So Xabi is at fault for either the wrong tactics or not being able to get the players to do it, okay? And then thirdly, the players are at fault as well, because I have been very disappointed by a lot of the attitude that I've seen in some of the players, by some of the nonsense and some of the kind of silly frictions, or, the players have a part as well, and they need to play their hearts out every single match. I have not seen that this year. I blame them a lot for the drops in intensity and concentration, because, that's not the manager's fault. Why does your attitude change every time you concede a goal or score a goal? That is not acceptable. So the players are to blame as well. So this situation is a product of mistakes made at every single level. So I don't want to point the finger at any single person, but I assure you that this little Pinto story coming back from the Super Cup, I don't buy it. This was a long time coming. This, you could smell a mile away, and I, like I say, wasn't surprised at all. Okay, where do we go from here? Well, Look, a lot of you say in the comment section, and I absolutely understand that nothing is going to change. You can get rid of Xabi, it's not going to change. These players, they don't concentrate, they blah, blah, blah. You know, the squad is unbalanced, all that kind of stuff. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. We have plenty of precedents in football, not just at Real Madrid, but in plenty of other clubs, where when things aren't working and you replace the manager with anybody, okay, you just take anybody from inside the organization and you stick them there for a few months. There are plenty of examples that has produced a positive reaction. Plenty. And sometimes you go on and win the Champions League. I mean, it happened to us. Remember Chelsea? I think, they fired their manager. I think they put like Di Matteo or someone in there. And they go off and they win their first Champions League. I mean, these things happen. So, don't be so sure that the rest of the year is going to be a disaster and that Arbeloa doesn't know what he's doing and he doesn't have enough experience. You never know. Sometimes, just removing negative energy is enough to sort of alleviate and oxygenate the atmosphere in the dressing room. And sometimes that alone is enough to produce a reaction. So don't be surprised if you do see a bit of a bounce back, because maybe there are issues and underlying tensions that we weren't aware of, and maybe Xabi's departure clears them up. So, look, Arbeloa certainly does not have the pedigree to manage this team. I mean, we all know that. He's a former player, and we all love him by virtue of that. And obviously, he has a relationship with the management team and the club and all that kind of stuff. But of course, he doesn't have the pedigree to do this. But putting Arbeloa in the situation is good for the club because it gives the club optionality. So it says, okay, we put Arbeloa in place. If it works, we leave him there. If it doesn't work, then we have an excuse to substitute him at the end of the season because he was supposed to be interim anyway. So it's a very convenient way for the club to have its cake and eat it too. Okay, this is an interim solution. If it doesn't work out, well, it's understandable because it's an interim solution. If it does work out, we leave him alone. But if it doesn't work out, we can substitute him and it won't be controversial at all. So this is a natural, rational solution. And again, in terms of what actually happens, I think it might be a little bit less predictable than you think. But anyway, those are my thoughts in terms of how all of this went down. This comes down fundamentally to the culture of the club and to the football we were playing. Okay, that is the reason. Everything else is just sort of, made things worse. But at the core of everything is winning. And if you're not winning, every little thing becomes amplified, and all of that kind of compounded, and that is why we ended up where we did. But make no mistake about it, this was about football, and this was about crap football, and this was about unacceptable football, and this is about us being Real Madrid, and the expectations and standards that exist at this club that don't exist anywhere else. That is what happened, in my view. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the matter. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Love you guys. And as always, a la Madrid.